I think that I'm getting one of the best parts of today because I'm briefly going to introduce our panel, but I've been asked to provide a quick context for this meeting today, and I would like to do that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Josh Fisher, who's going to ask our panelists specific questions, and then hopefully we'll be able to do some Q&A. So by way of context, I don't think it's a secret in the context or in the midst of everything we're doing. A lot of the youth panels and regional groups have taken this issue of having courageous, raw, honest, true conversations about race, inequities, and very specifically as it applies to their experiences in care. And that's what these young people, young adults are wanting to talk to you about today. But I just know that in the midst of their work at the regional level back in February of this year, as Josh Fisher, Gail Reyes, and others were talking about the annual Youth Capital Summit, one of the issues that came up was the absence of discussions on racial justice, injustice at the statewide Youth Advisory Council. And through communication with Gail Reyes and Josh Fisher, they coordinated together. We met multiple times to see how we could get that as a part of the agenda on the YAB. And I know that that community collaborative, one of the subgroups of our racial justice work group is a community collaborative. And one of their priorities for 2018 was to get youth at the table, and not just at the table, but for us to hear their stories that would result in change. And so in February of this year, we were invited to be on the agenda for the Youth Advisory Board meeting, the statewide meeting. And one of the agenda items was an opportunity for youth to tell us about their experiences, racial, cultural, linguistic, and care, and to be honest with us. And what was interesting about that is that you invite young people to do that, well, you better get ready because they're going to do that. And not only were they honest, and they were raw, and they were provoking, the conversation came to a point where we had to stop it. But Commissioner Katz was very clear that the issue that had come up was too important to not revisit it. And so in June, we had a follow-up meeting, and that was what our agenda was dedicated to. And we heard from these folks and others who are not here today. And so we have asked them to come together to share with you about some of their experiences in care as youth of color and what they've experienced. And Josh is going to ask a couple of questions that they have prepared themselves to respond to. And then we'd like to take some questions from the audience. That's going to be challenging given the limited amount of time we have, but we're going to try to do that and leave some time for that in a little bit. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here. Welcome to our panel. We've titled A Seat at the Table, Authentic Youth Engagement as a Racial Equity Driver. And it's good to be here with these guys. Actually, before we get into the panel, just a round of applause for their video performance. These guys did a wonderful job. The idea was entirely theirs. They wanted to speak on their behalf as youth in foster care to prospective and current foster and adoptive parents. Every word in that video was written by youth in care, and I think you could tell that it came through in that performance. I don't think we're used to walking on stage and hearing sniffling and crying, so I'm assuming that was the power of the video and not my bad looks, right? But thank you so much for watching that, and I hope that when you watch that it touched you in some kind of way to think about either what you might be able to do to help our youth in care, or to reach out to other folks who can reach out and help our youth in care. It's actually part of a much larger campaign that the Youth Advisory Board completed. There's actually a total of 13 different public service address videos that will be launched hopefully next month, and they'll be publicly available and accessible to all of our foster care recruitment workers and all the therapeutic foster care agencies and anyone else who wants to help. So just a side bit on that project. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But I want to introduce you to some of the stars of that video and our stars of the panel. I've asked each of these guys to introduce themselves a little bit, and including a 6-word story. This was actually inspired by NPR's Race Card project a few years back. in which folks in the country and now folks on this panel have been asked to try to distill their experience with race and ethnicity into only 6 words, which is a nearly impossible task, but I think really kind of shows you a gateway into where these folks are coming from. So I'll let these guys, the experts themselves, introduce them. We'll just go down in the order of the panel here. So we'll start with you, Vince.
Okay. So Vincent Espino, former youth and care from the Waterbury office, Region 5. There you go, all right. And now DCF employee in the Danbury office. Thank you. And my 6 words are the same, but so very different.
My name is Elizabeth Flores, and my 6 words are, you do not see my destiny.
Hi, I'm Jaquan Harris. I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Right, okay. I am also a former, DCF youth. Right now, I am currently looking for a job after having graduated from Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts with a BA in communication. My 6-word story is always visible, but never truly seen.
So these guys might delve further into their 6-word stories as part of their responses. And certainly in the Q&A, if you're curious, you might choose to ask them about those. But our first question actually has a nexus to the video we showed. So even though the video has a focus on foster and adoptive recruitment, it really, the idea behind it was to address the stigma of what it feels like to be in foster care and to be able to speak using their own voice to the folks they wish to speak to. And our first question, we're going to lead off with Jaquan. But Jaquan, knowing that there is a significant stigma attached to being a youth in foster care, what does it mean to be a youth in foster care who's also a person of color?
I just want to touch on the video aspect.
Sure.
Josh is absolutely right that this video was sort of targeted toward foster and adoptive parents, but it's also targeted to all of you sitting in this room here, people that help to make policy. Everyone has the ability to challenge pushbacks and meet me where I'm at, that sort of a thing. So no one is not touched upon in that video. And to speak on the stigma is something that I think my other 2 fellow panelists up here can absolutely agree with, that there is always a stigma in the foster care system. And for me personally, it's how do I explain this to other people? I remember meeting my foster mother of 14 years for the first time, and the first thing that ran through my mind was, thank God she's black. Because if she was white, how would I have explained that? And that was the first thing that came through my mind. It wasn't that this woman has opened up her home to me. It wasn't that, I'm away from my mom with this strange person. It was that, if she were white, I would have, been so sad inside because I couldn't explain to people. I felt as though that I had to explain to people. So that being a person of color, you would hope that, the stars would align just so that way you wouldn't have to have an added stressor of explaining to people because once they see that, their whole opinion and viewpoint of view shifts and changes. I mean, we all know how some people can view what, a black child and a white adult means. And that's something that youth don't need to have on their shoulders. No youth should have to explain their situation. So yeah, that's the stigma that comes with that.
Thank you, Jaquan. And Liz, I think you can pick up right there with what you were telling us about earlier.
First, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to share a story. I was 4 years old when I went into foster care. I was this tall, big afro, No one knew how to comb it. No one knew what to put in it. There wasn't Shea Moisture yet. We didn't have that yet. Yes. I need to meet the person who made that, honestly. Changed my life forever. When I met my mother at 4 years old, I never realized how different I was from her. I just wanted someone to hold me. I learned as I got older that I lived in a mansion with 15 rooms, and they had kids of their own. They were a white, Irish, wealthy class family. My mom had friends in the neighborhood that were wealthy as well, and when they had learned that I was a Hispanic, young 4-year-old, who they assumed that I would have issues in the future, I was going to join the family. And that everyone had their own opinion on what that was going to look like. My mom has lost friends in the neighborhood because of my presence in the family. And my mom told me, it doesn't matter what people think. I love you and you're my daughter, and you'll forever be my daughter. And I think that tells part of my story, and only part of it. Thank you.
So I too will share a story. My DCF, my foster youth journey started in a group home. And in this home, it was my first experience being a foster youth. And of course, you're nervous. You don't know what to expect. You hear stories. And you don't want to be one of them, you know? That same day I came into the home, another youth had also been admitted. Except I thought we were the same, you know? Oh, we're both youth from the community who's entering foster care for the very first time. And except we had a different reaction to it. I was just calm and nervous. But he cried and cried and cried and stood in his room. He didn't come out. And this went on for days. After the 4th day, we were eating breakfast with each other. And I was sitting across from him. And I said, hey, are you okay? Is being a foster youth that bad? Do you know something I don't? And he said to me, no. He's like, listen, we're not just foster youth. He goes, maybe you can pass for something else, but I'm a black foster youth now. And I had absolutely no idea what he meant. Truthfully, I had no idea. I just stared at him. I just continued eating my breakfast. Then, when I transitioned to a foster home, a beautiful family that I got to choose, thankfully. I'm Puerto Rican, and I was placed in a Dominican home. And I thought, wow, how lucky am I to be in a Hispanic here, you know, Hispanic culture. But then Puerto Ricans and Dominicans are really different. Yes, they're really different. So that brings me back to my 6 words. The same, but very, so very different.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Jaquan. We'll move into our second question, and we'll start out with Liz actually on this one. But University of California Professor Emerita, Dr. Angela Davis, recently came to Connecticut and was paraphrased in her speech as saying she actually wasn't interested in a seat at the table, but would rather like to see a new table being built. To the extent that's possible, and to the extent that we're on this journey, what does it mean for a youth of color to authentically have a seat at a table when it comes to racial equity efforts?
Being at having a seat at the table means that I'm representing 500 youth that are in care in the United States. And that is much more powerful than corporate greed, you know, whether it's integrity missions, you know, that they have. I think that the power that we have, the voice that we have in standing up for what's right, and the lost souls that are falling through the cracks of agencies, I think that us being here today is only the start of our journey.
As for myself, I see being a part of Youth Advisory Board for 8 years, you learn that having a voice is very important. What does that mean, though? You can have a voice and you can express yourself in so many different ways, but it doesn't matter if no one's there to listen. This needs to be a team effort. It's important for us to be at this table. And now, transitioning as a social worker, I understand both sides and I can see it. So now, it's my turn to listen. It's our turn to listen. We need to listen. Don't let the voices just flow. Sink it in, take it in, and let's do something with it. Let's take action.
Youth engagement at the table is accurate representation of race. It wasn't until a couple months ago that I found out that more than half of the youth in DCF are white. I live in Bridgeport, and if you told me to guess what demographic of people hold more of, the clientele of DCF, I would have definitely said African American, and then I would have said Hispanic or Latino. My mind was blown. The disproportionality that is in the system is absolutely insane. African American and Latino or Hispanic youth are twice as likely to be referred to DCF than white clients, than white youth. But why do they take up more than half, 60%, 61.4% to be exact? I think that's crazy. Anyone else? Like it's nuts. So, accurate representation at the table for youth gives a voice to the voiceless. And I think another thing that has to play with that is age. I started advocacy work when I was 16 years old. And I started, one of the biggest things that I did was a commissioner's meeting with Joette Katz. And I went in there and I fully expected to be dismissed, to be condescended to. But she encouraged our ideas and she asked us questions and she wrote notes. And she came back a couple of months later with, ideas that we had put forth. It was absolutely insane to see. When you're 16, the thing that people say is your job is school. Some of my greatest work has never happened in a classroom. So to have sat in a meeting with the commissioner of the Department of Children's and Families in Connecticut was mind-blowing. It was a mind-blowing experience, and honestly I thought it was probably going to be a one-time thing, but it turned into something that became a passion of mine. But here's the thing, that was 6 years ago. A lot has happened in 6 years, and guess what? The system has breeded me tenfold. There are youth coming in at 13, at 14, at 15, who all have a voice, who want to be heard, who speak out. So I think youth engagement at the table doesn't start at 16 or 17 or 18, 21. It starts young, it starts 13, it starts 14. And the last thing that I'll say about youth engagement at the table is this. So we're up here talking about youth engagement at the table. We asked for a table twice, and they said no. A table, not more money in the policy, not funding for something else, a table. They said no. How are we going to be talking about the very thing that you're denying us? A table, though. We had a pre-panel conversation at a table. You all checked in at a table. But now there's a table shortage. Now we need to call IKEA and find out why North America has no tables. So it's little things like that. It's those things. And guess what? Youth know. They see it. We noticed it immediately. We didn't ask for chairs, we asked for the table. You know, not to be silly about it, but we absolutely would have stood up behind a table. So it's the little things that slip through the gaps that we need to fix. It's the fact that when we're talking about how do we encourage and engage youth at the table, but we don't provide them the table. And Commissioner Katz just walked in and you missed it. I said some nice things about you.
So I just have to share some reflections of ingenuity and creativity. Jaquan, who's also from a theater background, says, we have a table right here. Why can't we just take the table here into the other room and put it on the stage? And so we kind of had to rechannel some of that energy, but it was not just asking for a table. They were getting ready to do something about it. So, Jaquan, thank you.
Jaquan, if you want a mic drop now, I'll give one back to you if you want. Yeah. These guys are so much fun to work with, and not just fun, but like the ideas that come from them are the right ones, right? The folks closest to the problems have the solutions, and all we have to do is let them lead the way, right? So we'll hop into question 3, and I'm sure these guys will have more to say about that. And question 3 really is to try to face outward, back towards you all. They put a lot of things out and kind of talked about some issues that we are facing, issues that they are already working on, solutions they are looking for. Well, we realize that we have a huge opportunity here with parents in the room, with educators in the room, DCF staff in the room, agency partners in the room, folks from the courts in the room. So the question is, and we'll start with Vince on this one, what can our audience do to make sure the youth they work with achieve more racially equitable opportunities and outcomes?
Provide an opportunity. Ask me. Meet me where I'm at. It's important, Jaquan, I'm sorry, for us to be at the table. As a youth in my foster home, we weren't the richest. We managed, right? But we were a family. We stuck together. And one day, when we were talking about politics. Who talks about politics? Just my foster brother and I, 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, are you up? Yeah. And he asked me, he's like, do you ever think we could ever see the White House one day? And I was like, kids like us don't get to see the White House, buddy. And he's like, oh man, that sucks. And it did. And you know what? I started this advocacy, right? I started to express my voice, and I was always wondering, like, does my voice really matter? Who's actually listening to me? And then I got an email stating that, hey, Commissioner Katz has invited you to attend a White House trip. I was like, this is a scam, don't click this email. And I went. She provided me with that opportunity do something different that I thought I would never in a lifetime ever experience. Ever. And That's important. To provide an opportunity for us to voice our opinions, for us to speak, ask us, be a part of our team. Meet us where we are at, right? And most importantly, allow us to be at the table.
Out of a few things that we're working on, and I'm sure we're all working on, is technology. Growing up in Kerr, I thought that no one knew who I was. I wasn't as important. My voice was not heard. And I was a young kid. Back in the days, kids were used to work in the farm and work in the family. But now, it's not only for economic reasons. It's emotional. It's family has changed, the evolution of family. And one of the things that I have encountered in DCF Kerr is partnership. I realize how important it is that everyone here today is from different parts of Connecticut, and we are all coming to network and to socialize and to break bread with each other in the field. But also because there's a need. For instance, DCF needs help from other partnerships like Annie E. Casey Foundation. Annie E. Casey Foundation has evidence-based programs. This is what we need for DCF. We need to prove that these kids are in need, that if we put something in front of them and give them the resources that they deserve, that they will turn that and give you something more.
Real quick, Liz. Go back a little. So you also mentioned technology at the beginning of that comment. Is there anything more you wanted to say about the importance of technology in addition to that collaborative relationship with partner agencies?
Yes. So with technology, I sit in the board with Regional Advisory Council, subcommittee meetings, racial justice, and one of the things that I asked for Bill Rivera was data. I wanted to see what was the demographics, what were we working with, and that is the first step. And the fact that it was there surprised me, and I was like, I didn't even know we had this. And if we are able to record everything that we do, keep document of all the good works and all the people who are in care, and see how the patterns change and what is happening in care, then we can all collaboratively work to make the system better and improve.
Thank you, Liz. Jaquan, do you want to drop the mic now, or do you want to?
Well, the thing is going to be tricky to get me to drop this mic in a couple of minutes.
Good. Yeah, we don't want to drop it. All right.
You let me know if I run long.
No, there's no such thing.
Yank me off the stage. So, question 3 for us. Wow, what you all can do. I am sick and tired of youth not knowing their rights in foster care. And this is something that many people in this room have been working on for years. I email Josh like on a monthly basis, and I'm like, Josh, like people don't know their rights in foster care. It's something that I bring up continuously because it was the single thing that got me into advocacy work 6 years ago. And here I am 6 years later, still meeting people that don't know things like the chain of command. That's like the first word in the DCF Bible. Like, some people follow the chain of command even if they get their social worker. It's just a thing. It's so fun to do. You do it because it's provided to you, because that's the way you assure yourself that you're going to get what you need, yet youth still don't know it exists. Like, that's absurd. Does anyone in here know the Speak Up video and the Speak Up pamphlet, the Speak Up campaign? That's a problem. How do more of you not know about it? Like, every hand should have raised. That's probably why youth don't know their rights and care. Just to be honest. Like, it's absurd. It really is. Underdeveloped teenagers become underdeveloped adults. And somewhere in there we expect the youth to find their way. What's with all our education? What's with all our resources? All our love? If we're not giving that to youth, then what is it for? You can't sell it. I don't get it. It's absolutely absurd that youth feel as though they are just pawns in a system. Like, we're talking about health services, human health services. But where's the humanity in a system that just moves people around? That doesn't tell them that, hey, you have rights. People don't know that the very people on this panel fought for the right for them to see their siblings. And we celebrated that. We were like, wow, look at what we did. A right to see your sibling, undeniable. Yet, youth don't know it exists. I find that whenever I tell youth just one thing that Commissioner Katz and all of the YAB groups, when they've come together, some of the things that they've done, and they can't believe it. And I'm like, I helped change policy, and they're like, what? And I'm like, what? How do you not know? Have you not heard? So it starts there. It starts with telling youth, and I do not want to hear the excuse they don't care. That is absolute BS. Because if they don't care, you tell them anyway. It's called being a parent. It's called being an educator, a teacher, a dependable person. I mean, I'd be nowhere. I wouldn't be on this panel if someone didn't consistently sit me down and say, you're wrong. Like, shut up. You have all of this available to you. One of the biggest problems that we have in the foster care system is that youth are signing themselves out at 18 without skills, without education, without housing. And then we all drive past them and go, pfft. What does that mean? Pfft. Can you put that in the document? Pfft. With quotes? Like, it's not enough. Ask yourself why youth are signing themselves out at 18. Or, better yet, ask them. And I guarantee you, you will not like the answer, but I guarantee that it'll make you change your mind. Engage youth. That's the fundamental thing that we need in order to assure that youth have what they need when it is time for them to leave. I mean, it's insane the amount of change you can see when you just put in a little work. I had the privilege of speaking at another conference on Monday. And I realized that if you give youth the tools, change will come. I mean, not to be political, but look at the students of the Parkland school shooting. They had that tragic event, and then they never stopped since. And, people will say what they want, taking their political side, but it's the action that matters. They said words and then they acted upon it. And then we look at our youth and we don't do the same. we've had tragic events happen to us, taken away from our parents, not knowing who we are, really. But the three of us had to fight and claw to be up here today, to get where we are. And other youth don't get that simply because they aren't told that they have that already. So, people tell me that I'm in the 1% of DCF youth, 1% who go to college, 1% who are successful, the 1% who make it. But I think that's wrong. I think everyone has the potential to be in that 1%. It's just the difference between those who are told and those who aren't. I mean, really, I'm tired of having to express the importance of youth engagement. It's something that is a no-brainer. I sit in meetings and people say, "You won't believe the things that I hear from youth." Well, that's cool, but where are they now? Where are they right here? Someone said to me, "You have to be invited to this to come." And I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, then the first people on the list should have been youth. I mean, it's just the thing that we need. If we're ever going to change as a country, as a system, then we need to start talking to the people who are actually going to change it. I think I should stop now.
I'm not sure you should, but yeah. The thing about Jaquan is he won't stop, right? I mean, like this work, I'm not talking about here, but this does not end when this stage set is over, right? You guys have done a tremendous amount of work. You guys have mentioned earlier, Commissioner Katz, your dedication to these youth. We've moved the youth work, the youth engagement work, quite significantly over the last 8 years. And we have every intention of continuing that, but there's still so far to go, right? Much to your point, Jaquan, it's not enough to change a policy if no one knows about it, right? And so I thank you for speaking truth back to power. I thank you for speaking truth to this entire room, and that goes for all of you as panelists. I think we're coming up on the time we had kind of reserved for Q&A, but I'm going to turn over to Bill.
We are, but I just know that themes came up, and thank you for crafting the questions and preparing yourselves to do this. But very briefly, before we do some Q&A, I just want to know, because you did talk about very significant themes, is there any one thing before we transition to Q&A that kind of emerged that you just, if you don't talk about it, you're going to have a heart attack or something like that? So Elizabeth.
I wanted to share something very important that is so relevant in different phases of my life. So when I was younger in 4th grade, I had a teacher, which is not, in this story, is not as important. And then there was the kids, and during reading time, I was separated to the kids who knew how to read and the kids who didn't know how to read. And I knew how to read. My parents, raised me every night. They read to me before I went to bed. And I knew my favorite book. It had a icky, sticky frog, and it had a little sticky tongue. And I loved it so much, and I loved to read. And because I was in foster care, I was put in the group that didn't know how to read, assuming so that I wasn't capable of reading The Magic Tree House. Instead, I had to read a book that had big letters, and I had to use my finger when I was forced to use my finger when I knew how to read thoroughly through the book. As I got older, I realized in high school, there was an algebra class with kids who skipped school, and kids who didn't want to be there, kids who wanted to hang out with friends, throwing things around. And then there was right across the room at the same time, there was kids, same level of class, who was paying attention, focused, and I was right next to the door just watching them. And I used to think, God, I wish I can be in that room so I can learn something. I can learn math. But I had to, within myself, advocate for myself to be in that room. And I did. I said, I don't belong here. I belong being in there. And that changed me. That was a step of advocating and having power for myself, finding my power again. And then as I got older, I went to CCSU, and there is this program called Kerr Scholars. And Josh referred me to Carlos Soler, and he's the program manager of that program. And it's for foster youth and alumni. And I thought, wow, maybe I don't want to do that because I'm good. I'm college. I'm going to do this on my own. And then I went into the open house, and they were so welcoming, and I felt like I was at home. I said, this is where I am, and my journey is going to continue with these amazing people who are supporting me and loving me and watching me and monitoring, and there's counseling, there's all these services that it provides. But not only that, the fact that there was someone who believed in me and heard my voice and said, I'm here and I want my education, and as a foster youth, they're there to help me grow in my education. And I'm glad that I have that. And there's other kids who are able to have that opportunity. Thank you.
Tag and I'll toss it right to you. Last burning thing. Sorry. Making important decisions should involve the people who's going to be affected by those decisions. That's just all I want to say.
Really quickly, I'll tell you where my 6-word story comes from. So just to remind you, my 6-word story is always visible but never truly seen. And so there's 2 instances of it. So when I was younger and when I first started doing things like panels like these, people would come up to me, a specific type of person, would come up to me and be like, oh my goodness, you're so well spoken. Okay, I'm glad other people got it, right? Okay, good. And it's the fact that it would always come from a white person to me, but never to any other of my other panelists who happened to be white. So it was basically them saying, wow, you're doing great for you. And like, I wouldn't expect any of your kind to be where you're at. So, that's something that stuck with me. And in college, I kid you not, I had a professor who was talking to another professor of mine. She and I were very close. And they were talking about, I'm a theater nerd, and so they were talking about shows that they were going to do. And a role had come up that required an African-American male, and my professor that I'm close with was like, oh, Jaquan's black. And then the other professor said, Jaquan's black? Are the lights on in here? Y'all can see me, right? So it's the stigma that black isn't kind. I consider myself to be a jovial kind of guy, right? I like to make people laugh. I'm good at it. That's like absurd that black can't be kind, and that's absolutely crazy. And we talked about this in our pre-op panel convo. If there's anyone who wants to continue this conversation, because we are kind of pressed for time, feel free to come up to me. I love speaking to people. I love talking to people. Hit me up.
So actually, all of the panelists are going to be joining us for the rest of the day, and they have actually agreed or invited you to hit them up as the day evolves. But we do have time. We got a little late start, so we just wanted to leave a little bit of time. I know there are a couple of mics out there, I believe. And if there is a question from the audience, just raise your hand and we'll get someone over to you right away. And we are asking that you keep your questions brief and that the panelists' responses are brief likewise.
Do you believe that if there's more youth involvement, that the youth can prove to DCF and everybody else that they are more than just the file that follows them around? Because I know, me being a DCF youth myself, that every house I've been to, a file follows me. And I recently noticed, mostly because of the fact that my foster mom over here has taught me that I have proven that I'm more than a file, but that's because I had a fight for it. Do you think there's a way that more DCF youth can show that, if they're involved a bit more?
The larger the group, the more powerful the voice.
Thank you. Because so many other kids have a file as well. And it's black and white. Black and white. You think about who's reading it, are people who can think black and white. If you want to think broader, then you won't just see it as just words, but it's life.
Absolutely. The more youth engagement you have, the more opportunities and groundbreaking things you have, like this video that we showed at the beginning. You know, youth and their minds are so powerful that they cannot just be confined by a file. Before I started doing advocacy work, nobody knew me. No one knew my name. No one took the time to know me. But now that I've started doing things like this, you know, 6 years ago, I walk into a room and people are like, Jaquan. And honestly, sometimes I don't know other people's names. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm so sorry. But it's things like that, creating opportunities, but not every youth is like that. It is up to the person who was looking at that file to just be like, let me put that aside, because no one likes paperwork anyway. But to just be open-minded.
Thank you, thank you. There's another question over here.
Hello?
I'm
Okay.
not seeing who's, okay. There's another question, Mike.
Yeah. So I have a comment and then I have a question. I just wanted to say, how many people are under the age of 18 in this room? You just raise your hand. Okay. 1, 2, 4? 4. So, I walked in here thinking there were going to be a ton of more youth than just 4. And I want to thank you guys for making me so much more comfortable in this setting, because what you said connected with me in a lot of ways and made me feel better, you know, being here. And what this young man just said about having to fight against a file, like, I'm coming up on my 7-year foster care anniversary, and I've had to, like, the past 2 years have been the only 2 years where what's in my file hasn't affected people's views of me. So like this whole time I've been like fighting against what was in my file. I mean, people thought I was a problem child when I was really just sad and like unlistened to and misunderstood. And I know that the Youth Advisory Board has an age limit, and I'm not at that age. I'm only 15 and it's 16. So what do you guys, what's your opinion on that?
First of all, why? Where are you from?
Like, where was I born?
No. Youth Advisory Board. Like, what's your Youth Advisory Board? What city?
Hartford.
Hartford?
It's
Anyone
16.
Anyone in here from Hartford Youth Advisory Board coordinator?
I would
Look.
encourage you two to connect with each other.
Absolutely, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. The fact that there's an age limit, I'm not sure if there is or isn't, but if there is, that's absolutely absurdly wrong.
I mean, every time I would ask about it, it would be like I started, the first time I heard about it, I was 14, and I wanted to be a part of it immediately, simply because of my experience. I know that there are people who were in my place when I first came into foster care, and I want to be able to represent them and help them. But I was always told, like, it's 16, like it used to be 14 and 15, but now it's 16, and I don't know, I was just sad that was.
So your liaison is here today. I'm going to ask your liaison to stand up.
I'm here by my, I don't have one. I'm.
From the Hartford office, Carlos. You all need to hook up right after we're done or during lunch, but yeah. Let's take a, thank you for that. That was a very good. We got it.
Just real quick, the age is 14, and maybe it should be lower. I don't know. I think
Yes,
your
it
comments
absolutely
are
should be
very
lower.
valid, so thank you. Yeah.
This is what I've been saying for 6 years now. And thank you, because that vindicates what I've been saying. That is proof right there. And Josh knows, because like I said, I email Josh like once a month, like, where we at? So yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that.
We have several. Yeah.
I would like to make a comment. I just want to thank God for your spirit of resiliency.
Who is that? We have many hands up, and we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but probably time for one or two short ones. Right here, this young lady has had her hand up. She's ready to jump, and then we have one over here. Yes.
So, my foster mom is black, and I get a lot of weird looks, and it makes me feel insecure because, like, I love my foster mama, and it's like kind of like I hate like how like stereotypes are now, and I just want like your opinion on it, like, because it bothers me that like I can't be seen with my foster mom without getting weird looks.
So this is right down my alley as well. We can link up after and really talk about it at a personal level. But yeah, so that's what that's a personal question, and I think I can assist you with some advice.
Yeah. We have time for two more. We definitely want to. I see you, and Barris has been hand up for a second. Yeah. These guys are available. I told them.
Okay, I have 3 comments. The first is L. Joy Williams, who is the president of the Brooklyn NAACP and the campaign manager for Cynthia Nixon for governor of New York, says, "I'm angry that someone has convinced you that you have to fight over this small, 1%, or have to be at this particular table. Give me a kitchen, I'll bake my own pie." That's the first comment. The second thing I want to say is, Mr. Espino, you are an example of an affirmative action step that we as the audience, members of the audience, can do to make some measurable change, that the people who are closest to the problem need to be in positions of power, making policy, having access to resources, and that's going to get us closer to where we want to go. And then I had my 6 words, but I'm going to give up the mic because that's not what you asked me to do. So.
Thank you.
I'm almost afraid to speak on this topic because it's very personal to me. What I want to know is, I can imagine that your journeys are much more complex than you expressed and shared, and it's not linear. It has its peaks and its valleys. I know a young man, and this is, Jaquan, this is to speak to your 1%. I know a young man that graduated from DCF services to homelessness. He's 22 years old now. I just got a text message that he's in Pittsburgh and he's in jail. And why it's so emotional to me is because I know that's the best thing for him. That is the exact best thing for him. But it is a tragedy and a travesty that this is the way he has to access services. So what I really want to know is there a way that you all and members of the Youth Service Bureau can embrace, talk to, mentor, manage, and help kids like that 99% that you talk about, Jaquan, that don't have success. Although success may mean many different things to them, but help them negotiate in travel that path similar to you all, so they can meet a relative success and they don't have to end up on a punitive track to get the therapeutic help that they need.
Absolutely. It all starts with just one person. That one person can be anyone, but I think when it comes from youth, when it comes from someone who's been there, when it comes from a person who is now in power, who says, hey, I spent years in this system, it means something more. We talked about this in our panel pre-op, and I didn't bring it up, but we were talking about how, and I love Josh, love him to death. You know, I know his story. He's an incredible person, has a big heart. But we said, what would be the impact if someone who were sitting on this panel looked more like me or looked more like Vincent and Elizabeth? We take for granted the power of people because of, I don't know, what do you want to atone it to? Politics, whatever. So 22 years old and is in Pittsburgh, that's a fail. That's a blatant fail. And the fact is, it was so simple for him not to end up there. I don't even know him, but I can tell you it was so simple for him not to end up there. All it took was just one person, and it's amazing what youth engagement does. Because I guarantee you, whoever this man was felt some type of way about the system, felt that his voice wasn't being heard, didn't like what he felt when he said to himself in his head, I'm in the foster care system. And it's battling through that stigma that allows someone greater to rise. I didn't end up here because I was destined to end up here. I ended up here because someone said, put that aside. Put aside the fact that you're in the foster care system and use that voice that you have. As a matter of fact, I can tell you what his name was, and his name is Mark Brown. And if he were here today, he would absolutely take credit for it. Y'all know Mark. Absolutely. But he was right. When I was 16, he sat in a car with me for an hour and said, kid, you've got something in you. Right there is where I changed. That moment. That's what it takes. It's a moment. Whether you believe it or not, whether you think kids are bad and they're destined to do stuff, whatever, then don't do this. Don't be in this field if you're going to be negative. If you're not going to fight for youth, people who haven't had a voice, then don't do it. It's insane that that is the best place for him.
And once again, the clock betrays us.
That darn clock.
Yeah. They're going to be around. Give them a moment to eat, if you don't mind. I think that's important for them. And then take the liberty at their invitation to engage them. Let's give them a round of applause. These guys are amazing.